What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast. And after a big scorching month of hell in July, we have come to the end of Exorcist Month. My co-host with the most over there, Dr. Zayas God, he just had a big swig of coffee. Danny, are you ready for our discussion on season 2 of The Exorcist?
I am. It's very funny that we've spent July in hell. This is, I believe, now the hottest month on record in human history. So no better time to talk about hell and possession and demons than probably right now.
August will probably then become the next hottest month in human history. Is there any other franchise we can go through that's just demons and hell and misery?
In terms of you live in Texas. I just think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the hell that they went through filming the first movie. Yeah. But I don't particularly want to spend a month watching Texas Chainsaw movies. The sequels don't hold up.
Yeah, especially that Netflix one. I mean, you hate that one. Yeah. A little aside before we go into our thing. The house where they filmed the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a restaurant in about an hour away from my house, and it's called Hooper's. And so it's like an actual restaurant where you can get like steak and shit.
All it just sounded like was you're inviting me to your home, and we're gonna take a road trip to the Texas Chainsaw House.
Come on, dude! I've been dying for you to come hang out with me here in Texas.
All right. We'll definitely do that. Maybe I always go to Louisiana during the summer. Maybe I'll do a side trip into Austin.
Nice, man. Nice. All right. Well, why don't we jump in? We're going to talk about the last 5 episodes of season 2 of The Exorcist, which was on Fox, episodes 6 through 10. We also recently watched the documentary Leap of Faith, which is essentially a conversation with William Friedkin, and shows all of his influences that went into the filming of the original 1973 Exorcist. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and if you want to catch up with us, the Exorcist TV series is streaming on Hulu. It's only 2 seasons. It's 20 episodes. And I am living proof that this show is bingeable. I've effectively watched it in 4 parts where I've binged 5 episodes at a time. It kind of just goes by, and it's good. It's effective. It always ends on a good cliffhanger, which makes you want to just leave it on and watch that clock in the corner count down to the next episode. And Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist, is streaming on Shudder. So if you have Shudder, you got to check that out. That, by the way, is directed by Alexander O. Philippe, who is a director we've actually covered on this channel back when we were doing Alien, the Alien series. We reviewed a documentary called Origin, which is his documentary about the original Alien film. He also has a ton of great horror movie and cinema documentaries. He did The People versus George Lucas way back in the day. He did 7852, a complete breakdown of the shower scene in Psycho. He did Dock of the Dead about the George A. Romero, and much to my co-host's cup of tea, he has a documentary that I've yet to see called Lynch Oz, about David Lynch and his affinity for the Wizard of Oz and his ability, I guess, to use the Wizard of Oz to kind of frame a lot of his cinema. So he's a great documentarian, and I would pay money to watch more documentaries like Leap of Faith, where they're not even documentaries as much as they are, as you said, they're just conversations with a great director about one specific movie.
Yes.
And, give me a documentary with Mike Flanagan about The Haunting of Hill House. Give me a documentary about with Ari Aster about Hereditary. Give me a documentary about Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction. Let's go big. Give me a Spielberg Jaws documentary where it's just Spielberg in a chair talking about Jaws for 90 to 100 minutes. and I'd be there opening night. So Alexander O'Philippe, big name in documentary films. And yeah, now we can get into season 2, episodes 6 through 10 of The Exorcist.
Yes. Danny, I don't know if you would have enough pairs of pants in your apartment after you watch that Steven Spielberg Jaws documentary. All the semen just over.
Semen, because it's a movie about people on a boat, right? And they, oh, okay, now I understand. Yeah.
No, that sounds awesome. I would also be down for Jordan Peele's discussion on Get Out. That'd be pretty fucking good too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, you just tuned me into this guy's filmography. I fucking loved Leap of Faith. And one thing that's really interesting about that movie in general is William Friedkin keeps talking about how he made all these decisions in the making of The Exorcist that were almost like unconscious decisions, like almost like instinctual gut instinct decisions. And it almost sometimes seems like the Exorcist movie was like made by like supernatural forces. They often talk about that movie like it's like somehow influenced by demons themselves, right? And when you watch the show, it's kind of a miracle that this show was on Fox and that they were able to like pull off this kind of level of horror on a network TV show. These last 5 episodes are essentially just like a horror thriller, with this one guy hunting down teenagers in the woods for 5 episodes. And I have to say that we've broken down the show into essentially 4 chunks. And even though I like this show overall, like I'm a big fan of the show, I would say that maybe this was the weakest chunk for me. What about you?
It's really funny. We've basically been dead on with this show. And I don't know if it's a complaint or just something that I noticed, but I thought that these 5 episodes felt kind of samey.
Yes.
Where
yes.
It felt like there was it's very ironic that one of the episodes, I think it's episode 9, has the word repetition in the title.
Right.
Because it felt like a lot of repetition of John Cho, who plays Andy. He gets possessed. We see him getting possessed by the end of episode 5. His ex-wife, who's not his ex-wife, his wife, who has passed away, who drowned, committed suicide. She is back, and she has been basically using this little girl, Grace, who doesn't exist, to kind of get into Andy, John Cho's character, and he is effectively possessed almost immediately from the beginning of episode 6 until midway through basically the end of episode 10.
Yes.
And it's 5 episodes of them trying to exorcise him while he is trying to, get into their past and do what the demons always do. And you brought it up. He eventually escapes their care, and he kidnaps the kids, and he kidnaps Rose, played by Lee Jim Lee, and it almost turns into like the way you described it as like a Friday the 13th, where like he's basically hunting kids in a cabin in the woods. And he throws the one guy. It felt like they borrowed. All of a sudden, we got aspects of a lot of other horror franchises. There's a lot of Friday the 13th. There's, dare I say, there's some The Ring in here. The whole idea of this well that, possessed people have thrown their children down, and Rose gets dropped down the well. I'm not saying that it was bad, but we both in our last review said that we genuinely loved the first 5 episodes. This second 5 episodes to end the season, it felt like there was a lot of repetition. It felt like a lot of stuff that we have seen and heard before.
Right.
And they also they set up Mouse and Father Bennett to have like it. To me, it felt like they were going to have a very significant side story. And that side story is completely derailed. They are almost non-factors. Aside from a little bit of flashback into Father Marcus and Mouse's backstory, where we find out that she was in fact possessed and that he was trying to exorcise her.
Right.
Aside from that, we don't really get this kind of side quest Mouse and Bennett adventure that I was kind of hoping for.
Right.
And Bennett ends up effectively out of commission. They have one scene where they bring back Maria Walters from season 1, and he ends up stabbed and he ends up in a hospital, and he's effectively in the hospital for the rest of the season. Yeah. And we come back to, because they were obviously setting up something big for a potential season 3 with Father Bennett that didn't end up coming to pass. But it just felt like they took this one character who we really liked from the end of season 1, and this new character who was like, whoa, pretty cool new character, especially the way she introduces herself into this season. And then they kind of just said, yeah, we're going to make this about the 2 priests on the island dealing with this possessed guy and his foster kids. And every once in a while, for about 4 or 5 minutes per 45-minute episode, we'll throw back just to, in case the viewers forgot that they were still in this show.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought that was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's just too much of like, oh, is John Cho going to get possessed? Are they going to uncover it? And then, oh, he's with the kids alone. Is he going to do something to them? Oh, he's tied them up. Now someone's escaped. Now he's going after someone. It just felt like they were really kind of dragging that out. Whereas with the other storylines, they had like significant moments, but they were few and far between. So it's like this stretched out John Cho storyline and then just like little glimpses of these other storylines. And while you were describing all that, Danny, it was really making me think that there's essentially like 2 types of demonic possession movie stories, at least. I don't know as far as novels go. I think there's probably more. But with movies, it seems like there's 2 types, right? There's the one type where it's essentially The Exorcist. There's a person, usually a child, usually a girl, that's possessed, and they're bound to a house. They're in a house. They're stuck there, and they're just tormenting the loved ones that are there with them. And the movie's almost mainly about the loved ones dealing with this possession. It's almost like a metaphor for dealing with a really sick person, a terminally ill person. That's one type of demonic possession story. The other one is kind of like the show Supernatural, where you have demons possessing people, and then they're out in the world doing horrible things. And it's almost like an invasion of the body snatchers, where you kind of have to figure out, oh, is that person a demon?
Well, that's essentially the Evil Dead version of possession, where you can get, the original Evil Dead, Sam Raimi's original movie, was the one girl, Cheryl gets possessed. She gets thrown in the basement, but the infection or the possession, from the Necronomicon spreads to everyone else in the house aside from Ash, and he's left alone to fight. It's almost like a Night of the Living Dead style. Like if you get bitten by the zombie, you become a zombie. If one person gets possessed, that person can then possess the other people around them.
Right.
We saw that earlier this year with Evil Dead Rise. I thought what you just said, that made me think of Evil Dead Rise, where you had the movie starts at the cabin in the woods, but then the movie effectively takes place in a LA apartment complex where the possession is spreading throughout. It's funny. The way that this show has worked, season 1, we started with, there was a few episodes, where to set up where we thought that the older daughter was possessed. And we see the other exorcism of the boy who gets his head broken, his neck broken, and then the main girl gets possessed. Who it was nice to see her back in this. That was a nice touch to bring her back.
Agreed.
But then, before it can get too much of the same thing, the last few episodes of season 1 kind of changes it up, where there's the reveal that obviously Gina Davis is Reagan from the original, and she allows the demon back in, and now she's the possessed one for the rest of the season. Plus, we also had the whole impending threat of the church is evil, and they're trying to assassinate the Pope. This season, we start with that church plot is still there. We start with there's the girl at the farmhouse who is possessed. Then it goes to Harper, the whole story with Harper. Harper has to be taken away from her mother, brought to this house. So I'm like, oh, okay, this second season is going to do that again. It's going to bounce around. It's not going to stay with the same exorcism for too long.
Right.
Because, again, if you think about the original Exorcist, it's a 2-hour movie. So, okay, 2 hours with the same exorcism.
Yeah.
This is 45-minute episodes. If you do 5 episodes in a row, that's 3+ hours of TV.
Yeah.
It gets a little, it starts to drag a little bit.
Yeah.
And the first 5 episodes started to switch things up a lot. These last 5 kind of stayed in one spot. John Cho is possessed, and everything is about him fighting the demons, where, the 2 priests are, they're individually fighting the demons as well. Tomas goes, allows himself to kind of go inward and get possessed to deal with the demons on the inside. Father Marcus is dealing with things on the outside. It spent too long without there being a secondary moment. There wasn't that moment of, oh, we find out that there was some, we brought this up in our last video, how maybe there's some kind of demon that's been living on this island for 50 years. That whole kind of subplot fell out of it kind of fell off to the side in these second 5 episodes.
I completely agree. They don't really touch upon that in the, at least the last 2 or 3 episodes. They don't touch upon that at all. But I was going to say to you, do you think that they kind of blew their possession load a little too early in this? I know I'm talking about ejaculation a lot today, but you mentioned the whole Harper subplot, right? And for me, once they introduced Harper and they made her go live at this house, I was like, oh, that's an interesting twist. Now you're going to have this girl that thought she was possessed and she's actually living in a house where there's a demon. Are people going to kind of treat her like it's a Boy Who Cried Wolf? And they're going to be like, oh, well, she thinks she's possessed, but she's just imagining it. I thought they were going to kind of play that up. But once she gets there, pretty much John Cho gets possessed right away.
I thought they could have slowed it down.
Right.
And I thought episode 6, for instance.
Yeah.
I thought they went way too quick in, Father Marcus is almost immediately is I think it's Rose, Lee Jun Lee's character, who mentions something to the priests about how she thinks something is off with Andy. And of course, instead of that being a slow burn for an episode and a half, they sit down on the couch and they're like, so seeing your dead wife? What happened to your dead wife? Why'd she kill herself? Why'd you make her kill herself? And I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Take it back, Marcus. Reel it in a little bit. If I were John Cho's character at that point, I'd be like, guys, get the fuck out of my house.
Right.
And he does say that at one point, but it's I felt like that happened way too quick after the episode 5 ends and you're like, oh shit, this is gonna be good. And then 30 minutes of screen time later, they're like, you're possessed, right? Huh?
Yeah.
Huh? It's your dead wife? Huh? And I'm like, fuck, calm down.
Yes. Completely agree. Yeah. They just jump to him being this possessed monster, and it's like the second half of the season. And when they get to it, it's this real kind of violent, upsetting reveal. He's getting real intimate with Rose. She's got her clothes off, and then he kind of starts attacking her. It's this great sequence. Like she's sort of like telekinetically getting messed up by the demon, and like the demon puts her like right into his hands, and he starts strangling her. It's great in terms of TV because it's sort of like it's doing it quicker than you'd expect. So you're like, oh shit, this is happening. But then once you do that so early, it's like, okay, well, now what do we do for the rest of the season? And I kind of hate that stuff. It happens on TV mostly, not in movies, like where they kind of have to fit a certain amount of episodes. And they're like, okay, well, he's about to kill this person, but then he gets a distraction from this other person, or they bring up something, he starts talking about it. I hate that. And then like someone gets away. Go ahead.
I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but like that is one of my biggest issues with episodic TV, especially in the last several years. The first time I really noticed that was when I was watching the Netflix Marvel series that were out, especially I think it was Luke Cage, where the first season of Luke Cage, they're way off on a tangent, but like, if you remember the first season of Luke Cage, Mahershala Ali plays a villain in season 1, and he's really good.
Yeah.
And then it's like episode 4, he gets killed off. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought he was the season-long villain. And then there were 13 episodes that season, and now you have to do 9 episodes without the character that you established to the audience as your lead villain. And it just felt like it dragged. And I feel that way a lot with TV, where they set up a number of episodes. I almost appreciate a show like Supernatural, or to give you an old one, the X-Files, where they were always able to delineate between, this is a Monster of the Week episode, just go crazy and have fun for an hour.
Right.
And then now next week, though, we're coming back and we're doing the Mulder conspiracy, and will he get to find his sister, and is the truth out there?
Right.
And I love that, Congress did like that thing about aliens this week, and there were a ton of X-Files memes all over the internet, which was great.
Yeah.
But like, that was why I love the X-Files, because it was like, yes, sometimes they said to you, next week you need to tune in because it's back to the conspiracy stuff. Right. But then sometimes they were just like, we're going to go balls out with a crazy monster this week, so just get ready to have some fun.
Right.
And in a show like this, they can't really do that. It's like, it's too insular of a story.
Right.
That you can't, and it's too insular of a cast, where you need to just focus in on this location.
Right.
Which is why, again, like, I thought it was disappointing I thought we were going to get some really fun episodes with Kurt Egiawan and Zalika Robinson, Father Bennett and Mouse, just like kind of secretly going around and killing off possessed members of the clergy. We got that one time at the very beginning. We got that really cool sequence in the catacombs in Antwerp. And then they have that one scene with Maria Walters, which is literally one scene. And then Bennett gets hurt. He's in the hospital, and that's the end of that.
Yes. Bennett getting hurt, that's one of those things that feels like behind the scenes, like not in the actual show. They had a plan, and then they're like, oh shit, the show's going to be canceled after this season. I think that when the show was being made, it was before Disney bought Fox. And so I think that probably affected whether they want to make any more episodes or not.
Yeah, I was going to say that, every time Disney buys a property, they're like, oh, well, now the Alien Queen is officially a Disney princess now.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I vaguely remember somebody going, does that make Reagan from The Exorcist a Disney princess? Like,
oh, no thanks.
But yeah, it almost feels like that actor got cast in something else and wasn't. I'm completely making stuff up. I have no idea if that's the case. But to be such a prominent force at the end of season 1
Yeah.
to be established as a primary character
Right.
in the first couple of episodes, and then to effectively spend the second half of the season in a hospital bed with tubes in your mouth.
Yeah.
It feels like the actor wasn't available,
right,
or maybe there was some kind of the writers just weren't sure what they wanted to do.
right.
Maybe you're dead on with the Disney purchase of Fox.
Yeah.
It just feels like something behind the scenes was awry
Right.
with the second half of this season.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I feel like they did want to, like Jeremy Slater, the showrunner, I think he wanted to go down some really interesting pathways. And I think that what he was doing with Mouse and Bennett was an example of that. When they have that conversation, what's the woman's name? That Maria, what is the
Maria
woman?
Walters.
Maria Walters. I think that's a really great example. In the first season, they established that the demons don't want her. They're not interested in her. There's something about her smell that they don't want. And then in this season, they established that she has cancer. And so it's the idea that like the demon doesn't want to possess her because her body's going to die. And in this season, they clearly established that if you kill a possessed person, if you kill the host, then you kill the demon too. So I actually really liked that whole sequence where she's just dying in a bed and she's trapped the demon. The demon is like a prisoner in a dying shell.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. Like another thing that was interesting to me, and it made one episode better than the others for me, was they kind of show how John Cho, who they really, really do a very effective job making John Cho this super likable guy. They make John Cho like one of the best people I've ever seen in a fucking TV show, right? This patient, loving foster dad. And they essentially show how he can go from that to this murdering, like almost like serial killer type. And it's the way that the process works is the demon goes into his memories and just starts slightly altering the memories a little bit to where he goes from loving and having patience for his foster children to literally thinking that they're a burden that led to his wife's death. And to me, that's very, very interesting stuff. Like a demon essentially like just editing your memories to change your perspective. Because it's going from taking a person that would never, ever hurt his foster children, would never give up his soul, to someone who does give up his soul, And I think that that's really interesting story material. And you only get that in one episode.
That was definitely the highlights for me. And what I want to make it clear, the acting on this show was brilliant. John Cho is brilliant on this show. We love the two leads. It's not the acting or anything that the actors on screen are doing. Even the foster kids, that whole foster family is great. I thought Brianna Hildebrand killed it.
Yes, agreed.
In her scenes, the second half of the season, where Verity volunteers to go in and like talk to possessed Andy, and knowing that he's going to say awful, terrible things to her. And I thought that at the end of the show, there were some really emotional moments that actually got me to tear up a lot during the season finale. So the acting is fantastic. It's just, it did feel, especially, I think it's also because we really liked the first 5 episodes. And so it felt, there's something about these 5 episodes that just didn't hold the momentum necessarily of those first 5 of the season. But still, it nothing was bad. I'm not giving this a negative review. We're just addressing some like criticisms about it. But yeah, I really like the aspect of, you get to see Alicia Witt, who plays Nicole, her walk off into the water, her suicide, from like multiple angles, multiple points of view. And every time the demons have switched something to make it, he could have saved her, but he was distracted by one of the foster kids, or he could have saved her, but he couldn't get to the water in time because he was doing something with it. And it's a way of polluting the memory of this character who you said is such a likable person and who you root for.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah, that stuff was really good.
Yeah, and one thing that is interesting about that is they established that on this island there is this demon that essentially has been using the island as its like feeding grounds, and it just like corrupts father figures, and then the father figures like murder their families. It's like this cycle that just keeps going, and it's made the demon stronger and stronger over time. You know, it's kind of interesting to think that a demon essentially, you know, is only as powerful as the host that it's inhabiting, right? Because once that host dies, the demon dies with it. And so it has to kind of keep jumping every time the host dies. And this demon, this particular demon on this island, it's not trying to kill the Pope. It's not trying to take over the world. It's just trying to basically ruin fucking lives. It's like this sort of like Amityville horror kind of feel, or, you know, and
that's another movie I thought of also that
yeah,
it gave me vibes of, like, you know.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, because I needed some clarity too. This demon that was possessing John Cho, it's the same demon that was possessing the woman in the beginning of the season, right? Or is it a different demon?
I think so, because of Tomas's visions.
Yeah.
Like with the black goo at the end,
Right.
and with the house and the handprints.
Yeah.
It felt like that was the demon, but then I also kind of thought it was the demon that's been on the island for 50 years.
Okay. That's where there was some confusion, right? Because that demon with the woman, that's not on the island. That's like some other it almost looked like Texas where they were with that demon. Because it seemed like, I mean, maybe that's the thing that they're going with the demons, is that maybe there's sort of this like kind of liquidy, oozy kind of presence. You know, they're almost like Venom or something. Like, because, you know, the demon in the first episode comes out of this pinata, and it like oozes out of a pinata that comes up. It's interesting, right? Because there is actually one really scary sequence in the second part of the season that I really liked. I was like, whoa, fucking, for a TV show, that's good. Where like Tomas goes into Andy's mind and he sees the demon, and the demon's just these fucking eyes, these glowing eyes in the shadows, and then it like comes out and attacks him. I thought that was really good. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, and then we get the requisite spider, like inverted spider walk in that scene. I'll tell you the scene that really messed me up, like in terms of like scary and then like disturbing, was when Harper's mom broke in, which I also felt was very random. And it took me a little while to even realize if that was real or if that was just a vision that the demon was giving them.
Right.
But Harper's mom, who had been drugging her and tricking her into thinking she was possessed because of her own mental illness, she somehow evades custody, gets on a boat, sails to this island, gets to the house, evades the exorcist priests, and like holds a knife to Harper, and possessed Andy like fights her off.
Yeah.
And stabs her and then freaking eviscerates her.
Yes.
And I was just like when he stabbed her, I audibly went like, ooh. Right. And then like you see his hand go up and I went, oh. Like I was like not expecting that. And again, like you said it, this was a network show. This was not HBO. This was not pay cable. This was not a streaming original show where you kind of are more loosey-goosey with the R ratings. This was on Fox.
Yeah.
And that woman got fucking gutted.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow. And it's like, I don't know. There's always something about, I think one of like the reasons that slasher movies, slasher in particular, work is because think of like every single person. Think of how you react when you get a paper cut. Think of how you react if you're like chopping vegetables for dinner and you miss and you just cut yourself ever so slightly. I'm not even talking about stitches.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I once, you can't even really see it, but like I got 3 stitches. The worst injury I ever had. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
3
man.
stitches in my finger. Do you
Yeah.
remember Chef Tony's Miracle Blade knives?
Mm-hmm.
They work. I cut myself in college, and I had to go to the ER.
Oh shit!
And my roommate dropped me off at the ER, and I got 3 stitches in my finger. And I just always think of that, like a paper cut, cutting myself while I'm cooking.
Yeah.
And I think how much that hurts. And then I think of like, okay, now there's a killer holding a giant knife or an axe or something that wants to stab me.
Yeah.
And it's so that scene where John Cho just eviscerates Harper's mom in front of her, I was like, oh.
Yeah. That
Did
was
not see that coming.
That was absolutely the point of no return. Like once that happened, you're like, oh shit, okay, it's on. We're going down this hallway. Yeah.
I like that idea was brought in here also. Like in season 1, they, one of the big things was how Callie, she murdered those people in the ambulance.
Yes.
And they had families, and like the police are trying to like effectively arrest this possessed girl.
Right.
And because, possession or not, her human body did the murdering. Yeah. And we see this again in season 2 where John Cho is like, they'll never let me keep my kids anymore. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm possessed. I fucking murdered somebody.
Yeah.
And then you see that at the end with Marcus also. And the effect that, committing one of the highest sins possible, even in the name of saving a soul.
Yeah.
How that affected him while he's in his his motel room, which happens to be room 237. Wink, wink. So I like that these characters, they don't just brush off casual murder.
No.
Like it means something to these characters.
Yeah.
Which I think is another thing that makes this show really good is, a lesser show would just be like, in the original Exorcist, Reagan flat out murders that guy who like came into her room and she threw him out the window. Right. And, we're basically left at the end of that movie with like, oh, well, it was Pazuzu.
Right. I actually did think that John Cho was so likable that they weren't going to kill him. And I thought that there was going to be this sort of like just tied up in a neat bow of like, oh, well, they explained that it was in self-defense that he killed the mom. I mean, that he eviscerated the mom. It was in self-defense, right? Like I thought there was going to be something like that, but then they just point blank just shoot him in the fucking head.
Well, let's also not forget, he also, again, straight up murders that nice couple that lives next door.
Right.
Carrying on the tradition of establishing a really nice married couple that you really hope survives, and that, oh shit, they die off screen in a terrible way.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
I also like that, just to get back to the 2 main characters, they kind of come full circle with these characters. Marcus gets another nice moment with Peter, the nature guy. I almost thought at the end that was how the show was going to end, with Marcus on the dock.
Agreed.
I really thought they were setting up for like a happy ending for Marcus, where the guy's boat pulls up and he gets on the boat and they just sail off together.
Right.
But instead they kind of, again, it looks like they were trying to set up for a season 3 that never happened.
Yes.
And also Tomas his story comes full circle, where we brought up in season 1 how there are different ways of exorcism, where you had these like benevolent nuns who attack the demons with love. Right. And Marcus is like, come here, you fucking demon. Right. It seems like Tomas has this unique ability to allow himself to, he allows the demon to come into him. Ooh. And he like attacks the demon from the inside.
Yeah.
He did this in season 1 with Pazuzu and Reagan, played by Gina Davis. He does this now at the end of season 2. I kind of like that scene, like you brought up earlier, where it's like him and John Cho are in their own like minds fighting the
Yes.
demon, and you get this like really creepy possession. Like, you know, you get to see the demon in full force inside.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because in the original Exorcist, probably the most chilling scene. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that the scene that is actually like the scariest to think about is when they go up to when Father Karras goes up to Reagan's bedroom and they pull back her shirt and it says "Help me." Like that's so scary to me because you don't know what Reagan is experiencing. It's all in your imagination, and you kind of imagine just the worst. You imagine like literal hell, like a little girl being tortured by a demon.
well,
Right?
it's funny because in season 1 of this show, we kind of got to see what that was, where Gina Davis was in that like really small, almost it felt like a room under the stairs kind of thing, where she's like
Yeah.
trapped and she's you
And,
know.
and see, like that's something that because a lot of the stuff they use in the Supernatural show, like obviously Supernatural is inspired by The Exorcist on some level, and like it's kind of created this genre of TV with demons and stuff, and The Exorcist kind of fits in that genre. The Exorcist show fits in that genre, and one thing I just don't like about that in general is that when they talk about angels and demons, they always make it seem like it's this gigantic, mythical, like crazy fucking, like almost like Greek mythology level stuff. But whenever they show things, it's always like in some creepy house. And it's like, this is in your mind, or like, or hell just looks like a basement in Canada. You know, it's like, it's not as like what you imagine is always cooler. Like, I mean, you watch Supernatural, obviously, right? Like
Yeah.
one thing that always stands out, like Castiel, there's a line that Castiel says in like season 4 or maybe season 5 where he's like, you don't know what my true form looks like. In my true form, I'm the size of the Sears Tower. But whenever they show like heaven, it's just a bunch of angel people in suits. And so it's like, I understand it's like it's television. You don't have a budget. You can't do some kind of crazy Lord of the Rings mythical thing. But that's what I want.
It's almost funny that the only show that I could think of that showed Satan or a demon in like this larger than life form is South Park.
Oh, really? Okay. Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Because like, think about it. Like, we talked about this last time. Every time you see even the devil on screen, it's always this like really cool portrayal of a great actor.
Right.
Christopher Walken, Peter Stormare playing Satan.
Right.
You know, they in Supernatural, it's the actor who's on Lost. I think he's one of the actors on Lost.
Oh, he played Jacob.
Jacob
on Lost. Yeah.
Yeah. So he plays Jacob on Lost. He plays Satan in Supernatural. You know, Mark Pellegrino. Sure.
I heard Athena. Yeah.
Athena loves those are like her 2 favorite shows. So like she instinctively knew to yell his name.
He's fantastic in that as Satan, as Lucifer.
Have you seen the trailer to the new Dracula movie, The Last Voyage of the Demeter?
Demeter. Yeah, of course.
I fucking love the portrayal of Dracula in that, where he looks like a winged fucking monster.
He's a bat, yeah.
Yeah, he's like and one of the great things about Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula from 1992 is just the fucking way that the monsters look. He's either like a werewolf looking monster, or he's Gary Oldman with the bun head, and there's nothing human about him. And, you know, obviously, if you're going to cast great actors and great talent, you want them to be shown. You want them to be the selling point of your movie. And so a lot of the time, or even your TV show. So a lot of time we get these portrayals where it's just a human being talking in a cool voice and saying great lines of dialogue, you know. And, you know, I'm saying this right now, and I want to go watch I mentioned it last time. I'm going to rewatch The Prophecy. I fucking love that movie. Viggo Mortensen as Satan and Christopher Walken as the angel Gabriel. Just amazing stuff. But, you know, it's still Viggo Mortensen and Christopher Walken. But
Right.
yeah, so like I see what I know what you mean. It's just these demons are always like the things that they're doing to these people are
Yeah.
so larger than life, but everything is also at the same time so small and
Right.
for the small screen.
Right. And that's actually why I like that scene in John Cho's mind, because they at least show like this demonic creature that looks like it's from that movie like Lights Out, where it has those like bright eyes and it's just like
Yeah.
a silhouette. I was like, okay, well, at least that's not just a person, right? That's kind of cool. Um, but in general, I mean, I didn't have any problem with the show. You mentioned at the very beginning of this recording that it was super bingeable. You just would go through it. When I thought, oh shit, I have 5 episodes of the show to watch, and now I'm back at work. How am I going to squeeze this in? I thought it was going to be a real chore. I thought I'd be down to the last minute watching it, but I finished this like fucking 3 or 4 days ago, just because it's so easy to just go from one to the next. And it's a true crime that this show is over, because you had some really great talent, I think, behind the scenes and in front of the camera too. Like, I think that if we could still have another movie or show with like Marcus and Tomas, I would be on board for that, man. I'd go to the fucking theater.
Yeah, I wish. I mean, David Gordon Green's going to do his own thing, but I wish that there was some continuity from movie to show,
Yeah.
and that because I think that they would thrive in 100-minute movie.
Yeah.
With where you can really get graphic, you could really make it rated R, you could take the real graphic stuff that they did on television and then just amplify it
Right.
to a rated R movie.
Yeah.
I think, and the cast was great. I think overall, I think season 2, I think I like, it's really funny. I think I like the first half of both seasons
Right.
better than the second half of both seasons. I would probably give season 1 overall. I think I gave season 1 a low 8 or a high 7. This I would probably give I give the first half of season 2 a 9, and I'd probably give the second half a 7. So if I'll average it out to a low 8 for season 2.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds accurate.
Oh, do we want to talk about we said we would come back to Father Bennett and what happens to him, because that set up what could have been a very entertaining plot thread of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about what they do?
Yeah. So, okay. At one point, Father Bennett's in the hospital. He's been sidelined, and there's these 2 priests who obviously they're for the other side. The nurse says something like, oh, he's in bad shape and, hopefully he'll recover. And the priest says something like, oh, we hope so, or God will take care of him. And then they cut to underneath his bed, and there's one of those like urns or whatever. And the smoke or the shadow presence is coming up into his bed. And the way that was filmed, it was almost making me think that like they were going to drag that sequence out and make it like, oh no, is Father Bennett going to get turned? But they immediately cut to that urn and the stuff rising up. So it's like, oh yeah, he's going to be turned. And so by the very last episode, they show his eyes for a minute. And he's got the demonic eyes. And then they cut to essentially the jump scare from The Exorcist 3.
Yep. I'm watching the scene and I'm thinking, I did like another out loud kind of take where I was like, oh no, they're going to do it. And then it cut to the hallway and it's a steady cam.
Yep.
The camera's not moving.
Right.
The nurse is going door to door.
Right.
Walks into Father Bennett's room, walks out, shuts the door, and then door open, Father Bennett with the big shears. And then it literally cuts to the decapitated statue. And I went, wow. Like, they were just like copy, paste.
Yeah.
And again, because it's the last episode of a season, if that was going to be, in theory, their setup for season 3, I would have been okay with it. I am okay with it.
Yeah.
If they did that in like episode 2 or 3, I would have been like, oh, come on. So unfortunately, we never get to see a follow-up to that. But I mean, we talked about how in season 1, they do some like on the nose callbacks to the original. They have Chris McNeil pull up with her hat on like she's Father Merrin in the fog. I just finished watching William Friedkin talk about that moment and how it's based on, I think it's Caravaggio painting. And then to just kind of copy and paste that scene from Exorcist 3, it's a ballsy move.
Yeah.
But again, if that was the direction they were heading, I would have been okay watching a season of Marcus and Tomas going after a Gemini killer type version of Father Bennett,
See, and I think that it could have literally been the Gemini killer demon if they wanted to, because in The Exorcist 3, if they're going by the rules of this show, they don't kill Karras with the demon inside of him. Like, he kind of exorcises the demon and then he kills him, right?
In the original?
3, in the original Exorcist 3. Like,
oh, yeah. So basically the ending of Exorcist 3 is what happens to John Cho.
Yeah.
Where like Father Karras takes control back of his soul for like a second and yells at Kinderman to shoot him.
Oh, okay, so he does kill him.
Yeah. So he kills Father Karras.
Right, I know that, but I'm saying like I guess the demon does die then, if we're going by these rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or yeah, then like a demon that would be like the Gemini killer, which is kind of interesting because like they think that the Gemini killer, it's like a copycat in the 3rd movie, and then it's okay. That'd be cool. I don't know. I'd be all on board for that. It's funny because we didn't even talk about Believer that much. We sort of talked about Believer last week, but there was one point I wanted to bring up. It's kind of not related to the show. It's just related to Leap of Faith. But I kind of wanted to just talk about one thing about The Exorcist in general, the Exorcist franchise. And I think that the Exorcist franchise really thrives based on a choice that William Friedkin very consciously makes in his filmmaking. And in the beginning of Leap of Faith, William Friedkin talks about how he has this one cinematographer that like literally filmed like fucking Castro's rise to power in Cuba. Do you remember this part?
Yeah.
And so like he was saying that he would have this guy, he wouldn't bring him on when they were setting up the shots and stuff for the movie. And then he would be like, okay, start filming and don't cut. And to me, I think that one of the reasons why The Exorcist is so scary and probably why it's such an iconic film is because it really almost does feel like a documentary when you're watching it. It just feels like you're a spectator watching the movie versus like this is this sort of manufactured thing that you're watching, And they talk about that a lot in Leap of Faith. And one other thing, I don't know if you've gotten to this point in the documentary, but Friedkin talks about how he really didn't want the music to tell you how to feel about the movie. So the music is very subtle for the most part in The Exorcist. And I think that that's what makes the original movie work. And the show doesn't really have it. And now I'm wondering, is David Gordon Green's movie going to have it? And I'm guessing it's not going to be like that. I'm guessing David Gordon Green's movie is going to be just like over the top. It's going to be like Insidious or something.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as being very subtle. But I still come to, so I'll give you an example. I posted this on Twitter, and yes, I refuse to use that ridiculous new name for it. Yeah. But I posted on Twitter, like, for those of you who don't like the Exorcist Believer trailer, what would you have preferred? And I was genuinely asking, like, I wasn't being a dick. I wanted, like, because there's very few possession ideas that you can do today or even at all. Yeah. Right? You can either do like possession is an infection that spreads like Evil Dead, right, or it's one person is possessed and has to be cured of it.
Right.
And right after I asked that question, I went to the movies and I saw the movie Talk to Me. Not Talk to Her by Pedro Almodovar, Talk to Me, the new horror movie that is out.
Right.
I did a 60-second spoiler-free short for the channel. If you get a chance, you and anybody listening should go see it. It's
Okay.
an incredibly unique possession movie. It doesn't sell itself as a possession movie. It sells itself kind of as maybe like there's like a haunted object kind of thing, but it is a possession movie, and it does some really interesting things. Another YouTube critic who I tend to like a lot of his stuff, named Cody Leach. I don't know if you've ever listened to him.
No.
He said a really interesting thing. He said the movie is it's not as scary, but it makes you feel uneasy. It's like disturbing without being really scary. And I thought it was a really interesting, unique take on the exorcism or possession subgenre.
Yeah.
I think the trailer to David Gordon Green's movie looks good. I think it, for a legacy sequel, it does what I kind of expected.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm gonna watch it. So
I think what's interesting, and this, oh boy, this is like a little spiral onto itself. But when you watch Leap of Faith, you can see that like this is a fucking work of art that a filmmaker is putting together, and it's not this sort of studio thing. I mean, a studio is always involved in a movie, no matter what, right? And always has its hands on what's going on and can influence it. But like, you can see that it's like fucking William Friedkin's vision when you watch Leap of Faith. And I feel like
to the point where he told the writer of the book, "You can't be in the movie." Like,
right.
And he told him, "Your original script for this movie is terrible, and it ruins your own book." Like, the book. One thing that comes across more than anything in that documentary is William Friedkin has the biggest fucking balls I've ever seen on a director.
Yes.
And there's probably a reason he doesn't make a lot of movies today, because he even says, I probably couldn't make a lot of movies these days.
Right. He does. I mean, he says a few things in this documentary that I know from watching other Exorcist documentaries, which I love. I love the behind the scenes stuff for Alien and the behind the scenes stuff for Exorcist. Always super interesting. But he talks about how like Stacy Keach was going to be Father Karras at one point, and they literally just had to pay his whole salary and tell him he's not in the movie. There's another point when he has this friend who's a composer, and the composer makes a score for the movie, and then he basically tells his friend, "No, I don't want to use that score." And so he really has like a singular vision for this movie, and I think that's the reason why we're still talking about it. There's a TV
He
show
also
based on it.
admitted to firing a gun on set to get Jason Miller to react a certain way. Yeah, he's one of a kind. He's old school in a way that you can't do anymore.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, it really makes me want to watch the movies from his filmography that I haven't seen, namely Sorcerer, which I've heard for years is just an amazing fucking movie. So I'm going to go out of my way to see that. Also, Stacy Keach, by the way, is the lead with Jason Miller, with Scott Wilson from Exorcist 3 in the 9th configuration that Blatty directed and wrote, and you said was like supposed to be his almost spin-off from The Exorcist.
Oh, we should still fucking watch it. I know we're saying the Exorcist month is over, but we should still fucking cover that. We should we should cover that, and we should cover Prophecy too, because I've never seen Prophecy, so I need to watch it.
The Prophecy with Christopher Walken. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, not Prophecy, which is like a werewolf movie with like Armand Asante or whatever, right?
I think so.
Yeah. The guy that's in Judge Dredd that plays Rico. Anyway, we're right at the hour mark, so I think we're gonna have to put our Exorcist conversation to an end here. But I want to know what you guys thought about the second half of season 2. What do you guys think of Exorcist month in general? Are there big Exorcist fans? Let us know, because I just love talking about this franchise at this point now. Yeah. So Danny and I were talking about maybe covering the show From. If you guys have some recommendations for August, like, let us know. Are you still on board for that, Danny?
Yeah, I'll say I'm good for whatever.
Okay. And of course, guys, Danny always puts out amazing short videos where he's talking about movies, just like he talked about Talk to Me. And you can check that out if you subscribe to the Lastercast. So we will see you guys next time.